The war had lasted 7 years. 7 long years of blood, fire, and death across 100 worlds. But now it was over. Humanity had won. Jake stood in the great hall of the palace and tried not to show how tired he was. His dress uniform felt strange after so many years in combat armor. The medals on his chest felt heavy. He was only 29 years old, but the war had aged him. His brown eyes had seen too much death. His hands had taken too many lives. Around him, the hall stretched upward like a cathedral made of crystal and gold. They were a proud species. They stood 8 feet tall with 4 arms and skin like polished stone. For centuries, they had conquered every species they met. They had never lost a war. Until they met humanity. Jake remembered the first battles. They had laughed at the small, soft humans with their primitive weapons. They stopped laughing when human soldiers kept fighting after wounds that would have killed any other species. They stopped laughing when human generals adapted faster than their ancient strategies could handle. They stopped laughing when human engineers built weapons that turned their mighty warships into burning metal. Now the Emperor sat on his throne, his head bowed in defeat. His 4 arms hung limp at his sides. Behind him stood his 7 daughters, the princesses of the Empire. They were the finest examples of breeding, each one groomed for power and conquest. Admiral Cole stepped forward. She was a tall woman with gray hair and cold eyes. She had commanded the final assault that broke the fleet. According to the terms of surrender, she said, her voice echoing through the hall, humanity is granted one symbolic prize, a gesture of peace between our peoples. She paused and looked at Jake. Sergeant, as the soldier who captured the flagship and personally defeated Commander in combat, the honor of choosing falls to you. Jake felt every eye in the room turn toward him. Human diplomats watched with calculating expressions. Nobles stared with barely hidden hatred, and the 7 princesses looked down at him from the raised platform where they stood. He knew what was expected. Everyone knew. He was supposed to choose one of the princesses as a diplomatic bride. It was an ancient tradition, and humanity had demanded it as part of the surrender. A princess would come to Earth as a symbol of the new peace between species. Jake began to walk toward the platform. His boots clicked against the crystal floor. The sound seemed too loud in the silent hall. He looked at the first princess. Was her name? She was tall and powerful, with armor-like skin that gleamed like silver. She commanded the Third Fleet and had personally destroyed 2 human colony ships. Her eyes burned with fury as she looked at him. He walked past her. The second princess was. She was slender and elegant, with eyes that seemed to look through him rather than at him. She was a telepath, famous for breaking the minds of enemy commanders. Jake felt a cold pressure against his thoughts as he passed her. She was testing him, trying to find weakness. He kept walking. Was the third princess. She was built like a warrior, with scars across her stone-like skin. She had killed 11 human soldiers in single combat. Her 4 hands clenched into fists as Jake approached. He walked past her too. The 4th, 5th, and 6th princesses were equally impressive. One was a scientist who had designed weapons that vaporized entire battalions. Another was a diplomat who had convinced 3 neutral species to join the war against humanity. The last was a spy master whose agents had nearly assassinated Admiral Cole twice. Jake looked at each of them. Any one of them would be a valuable prize. They had power, knowledge, and connections. Choosing any of them would be a smart political move. But Jake did not stop for any of them. At the end of the line, almost hidden in the shadows, stood the 7th princess. She was small for a barely 6 feet tall. Her skin was pale gray instead of the polished stone color of her sisters. She had only 2 fully developed arms. Her secondary arms were small and weak, hanging uselessly at her sides. Her name was. Jake had read about her in intelligence reports. She was considered defective, a shame to the royal family. She had been hidden away for most of her life, kept out of sight so she would not embarrass the empire. She looked up at Jake with large purple eyes. There was no anger in them, no hatred, just confusion and fear. She did not understand why he was looking at her. No one ever looked at her. Jake stopped in front of her. The hall erupted in whispers. Human diplomats exchanged shocked glances. Nobles muttered in disbelief. Even Admiral Cole raised an eyebrow. "What is he doing?" someone whispered. "He cannot be serious," another voice said. The Emperor rose from his throne. His voice boomed through the hall. "Human soldier, you stand before the weakest of my daughters. She has no power, no strength, no value. Surely you wish to choose another." Jake did not look away from. Her eyes were wide now, filled with a mix of hope and terror. She expected him to turn away. Everyone always turned away from her. "No," Jake said. His voice was calm and steady. "I choose her." The Emperor stared at him. "You would waste your prize on this broken thing." Jake finally turned to face the Emperor. There was something hard in his eyes now, something that made even the mighty ruler take a step back. "She is not broken," Jake said, "and she is not a thing, she is my choice." He turned back to and extended his hand. It was a human gesture, one that meant friendship and trust. He did not know if she would understand it. For a long moment just stared at his hand. Her whole body was trembling. In her entire life, no one had ever offered her kindness. No one had ever chosen her for anything. Slowly, carefully, she reached out with one of her small hands and placed it in his. Jake smiled at her. It was the first real smile he had given in years. "Come on," he said gently, "let us go home." As they walked out of the great hall together, kept waiting for the trick. She kept waiting for the cruelty to begin. She did not understand why this human had chosen her. But Jake knew exactly why. And in time, the whole galaxy would understand too. The human ship was called the Starlight. It was small compared to warships, but it was fast and comfortable. Had been given her own room, a small cabin with a bed, a desk, and a window that looked out at the stars. She sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. She had been on the ship for 3 days now, and she still did not understand what was happening. Her whole life had been a prison. From the moment she was born, the doctors had known something was wrong with her. Her secondary arms were too small. Her skin was too soft. She did not have the natural armor that protected others. She was weak in a society that valued only strength. Her father, the Emperor, had been ashamed of her. He had ordered her kept out of sight, hidden in the oldest part of the palace where no visitors ever went. Her sisters had ignored her completely. To them, she did not exist. The only friends had were the old servants who brought her food and the ancient books in the forgotten library. She had spent years alone in that library, reading everything she could find. She read about history and science. She read about languages and cultures. She read about species that had died long ago, leaving only their words behind. It was the only thing she was good at: reading, learning, understanding. But none of that mattered to them. They did not care about knowledge. They cared about power, and had no power at all. A knock on her door made her jump. She stood up quickly, her heart beating fast. Was this when the cruelty would begin? Was this when the human would show his true nature? The door opened, and Jake stepped inside. He was carrying a tray with 2 cups and a small pot. "I brought tea," he said with a smile. "I thought you might want some company." Stared at him. She did not know what to say. In all her years, no one had ever come to visit her just to talk. Jake set the tray on the small desk and pulled up a chair. He poured tea into both cups and handed one to her. She took it with trembling hands. "It is hot," he warned her. "Be careful." They sat in silence for a moment, held the warm cup in her hands and watched the steam rise from it. The smell was strange but pleasant. She had never had human tea before. "Can I ask you something?" Jake said. Nodded slowly. "What did you do all those years in the palace? I read that you were kept away from everyone. That must have been lonely." looked down at her tea. No one had ever asked her about her life before. No one had ever cared. I read, she said quietly. Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper. I read books, many, many books. Jake leaned forward, interested. What kind of books? Everything, said. She felt something strange in her chest. It took her a moment to realize it was hope. I read about history, about the old empires that existed before about species that are gone now. I learned their languages. I studied their writings. Jake's eyes widened. You learned dead languages by yourself. Nodded, she felt embarrassed now. It sounded so small compared to what her sisters had done, had conquered worlds, had broken the minds of generals, and what had done. She had read old books. That is amazing, Jake said. Looked up at him in surprise. What? Learning languages is hard. Learning dead languages with no one to teach you is almost impossible. How many languages do you know? Thought about it, she had never counted before. 23, she said. But some of them are incomplete. The records were damaged, so I could only learn parts of them. Jake laughed. It was a warm sound full of genuine delight. 23 languages, and your family thought you were worthless. Flinched at the word. She had heard it so many times. Worthless, broken, defective. Jake noticed her reaction. His expression softened. I am sorry. I did not mean to upset you. I just meant that your family was wrong, very wrong. I do not understand, said. Why did you choose me? My sisters are powerful. They could have helped your people in many ways. I have nothing to offer. Jake put down his tea and looked at her seriously. Do you know why humanity won the war? Shook her head. It was not because we were stronger. They are much stronger than us. It was not because we had better weapons. At the start of the war, your technology was far ahead of ours. He paused. We won because we learned. We studied your tactics and found weaknesses. We analyzed your technology and made it better. We listened to the stories of species you had conquered and found ways to fight back. He leaned forward. The galaxy is full of warriors. Every species has soldiers and generals and weapons. But scholars, true scholars who can understand the past and learn from it, they are rare. They are precious. Felt tears forming in her eyes. She blinked them back quickly. Did not cry. It was considered a weakness. There is something else, Jake said. His voice was quieter now, more serious. Something I have not told anyone yet. Something I found during the war. Looked at him, curious despite herself. On one of the dead worlds we passed through, I found a warning. It was carved into stone in a language no one could read. Our best experts tried for months to translate it. They failed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. He pressed a button, and a hologram appeared in the air between them. It showed strange symbols carved into ancient rock. Can you read this? He asked. Studied the symbols. They were old, very old, but she recognized the patterns. She had seen similar writing in the ancient texts she had studied. It is a warning, she said slowly. It says that the machines will return, the machines that eat worlds, the machines that silence stars. She looked at Jake with wide eyes. What does this mean? Jake's expression was grim. It means that the war we just finished might be the smallest of our problems. And it means that you, princess, might be the most important person in the galaxy. Stared at him. For the first time in her life, someone was looking at her like she mattered, like she had value, like she was not broken at all. And something inside her, something that had been cold and dead for so long, began to warm. Earth was beautiful. Stood at the window of the human government building and stared at the blue sky, the green trees, and the shining ocean in the distance. She had never seen anything like it. There was all gray stone and red dust. This place was alive with color. But she could not enjoy the view. Not today. Today she had to face the human leaders, and she was terrified. Jake stood beside her. He had been with her every day since they left space. He had taught her about human customs. He had helped her practice her speech. He had told her again and again that she could do this. She was not sure she believed him. "They are ready for you," said a young aide, opening the door to the council chamber. Took a deep breath. Her hands were shaking. Jake gave her a small nod of encouragement. She walked into the chamber. The room was large and round, with seats arranged in a circle. 50 of the most powerful humans in the galaxy sat watching her. At the center was Admiral Cole, her gray eyes sharp and calculating. Beside her sat politicians, generals, scientists, and diplomats. They all stared at like she was a puzzle they could not solve. "Princess," Admiral Cole said. Her voice was polite but cold. "Welcome to Earth. Please explain to this council why Sergeant chose you over your more accomplished sisters." Felt her throat tighten. She wanted to run. She wanted to hide. But she thought of Jake's words, of his faith in her, and she forced herself to speak. "I know you are disappointed," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it did not shake. "You expected a warrior or a telepath, someone who could give you military secrets or political power. Instead, you got me, the broken princess, the one even her own family threw away." Some of the council members shifted uncomfortably. A few looked away. "But I am here to tell you something important," continued. "Something that matters more than any war with my people." She pressed a button on the small device Jake had given her. A hologram appeared in the center of the room, showing the ancient warning symbols. 15,000 years ago, a species called the lived on the edge of this galaxy. They were peaceful. They studied the stars. They built great cities of light and music. And then one day they were gone, destroyed. Every man, woman, and child, every city, every world. Nothing was left but ruins and warnings carved in stone. The council members were paying attention now. Even Admiral Cole leaned forward. "They were not the only ones," said. "I have found records of 12 other species, all destroyed the same way. They all left the same warning. They called the enemy by different names, but they all described the same thing. Machines. Giant machines that travel between stars, that consume entire worlds, that cannot be reasoned with or stopped." She changed the hologram. Now it showed a map of the galaxy with 12 red dots scattered across it. "These are the dead zones, places where nothing lives anymore, places where the machines already passed through." She added a new line to the map, a line that connected the dots. "And this is their path. Every few thousand years they return. They follow the same route, and according to my calculations, they will reach inhabited space again within the next 50 years. The room was completely silent. The council members stared at the map with pale faces. "How do you know this?" Admiral Cole asked. Her voice was no longer cold, it was afraid. "Because I spent my life studying dead languages," said. "Because while my sisters learned to fight, I learned to listen to the voices of those who came before us. I read their warnings. I decoded their messages. I learned what killed them." She paused. "And I believe I can learn how to stop it." Admiral Cole stood up slowly. "You are telling us that there is a threat coming that destroyed 12 civilizations, and you are the only one who can help us fight it." "Yes," said. "I know it sounds impossible, but I have already translated more of the ancient texts than all your experts combined. I know what the machines are. I know how they think. And somewhere in the warnings left by the dead, there is a way to survive. I will find it." The room erupted in noise. Council members talked over each other. Some demanded proof. Others wanted to know more about the machines. A few insisted that this was some kind of trick. But Admiral Cole raised her hand, and everyone fell silent. "Sergeant," she said, looking at Jake, "you knew about this when you chose her, did you not?" Jake stepped forward. "Yes, Admiral. I found the first warning during the Battle of Nexus 7. I knew we needed someone who could read it, someone who understood the old languages, someone patient enough to dig through thousands of years of dead history to find the truth." He looked at with pride in his eyes. "There is only one person in the galaxy who can do that, and she is standing right here." Admiral Cole studied for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. "Very well," she said. "Princess, you will be given a team of our best researchers. You will have access to every resource we possess. Find us the answers we need." Her voice hardened. "The survival of every species in this galaxy may depend on it." Felt dizzy. This morning she had been a worthless outcast. Now the fate of the galaxy rested on her shoulders. She looked at Jake. He smiled at her. And somehow, that smile made her believe she could do this. "I will not fail you," she said to the council. "I will find the answer, I promise." It was a big promise, the biggest anyone had ever made. But as she walked out of the council chamber with Jake beside her, felt something she had never felt before. She felt like she mattered. 6 months had passed since addressed the Human Council. In that time, everything had changed. She now worked in a massive research center built just for her project. Hundreds of scientists, linguists, and historians from a dozen different species worked alongside her. Screens covered every wall, displaying ancient texts, star maps, and decoded messages. The room hummed with activity at all hours. And at the center of it all was. She was different now. The scared, trembling princess who had arrived on Earth was gone. In her place stood a confident woman who commanded respect. She had let her pale gray hair grow long, and she wore simple human clothes instead of robes. She moved through the research center with purpose, answering questions, directing teams, solving problems that had stumped experts for months. Jake watched her from across the room. He was proud of her, so proud that it sometimes hurt. "She is amazing," said Dr. Carroll, the human linguist who led one of the research teams. She was a small woman with wild red hair and thick glasses. "In 6 months, she has translated more ancient texts than we managed in 50 years. She sees patterns that none of us can see." "She always had it in her," Jake said. "She just needed someone to believe in her." Doctor smiled. "You really care about her, do you not?" Jake did not answer, but his expression said everything. Across the room suddenly stood up from her workstation. Her eyes were wide, her hands were shaking. "Everyone stop," she said. Her voice cut through the noise of the room. "I found something." Within minutes, the entire team had gathered around her. Jake pushed through the crowd to stand beside her. He saw fear in her eyes and his heart grew cold. "What is it?" he asked quietly. Took a deep breath. "I was wrong about the machines. I thought they returned on their own following some kind of cycle, but that is not what happened." She pressed a button and a hologram appeared showing a strange device. They were summoned. Someone called them here. The room went silent. "This is a beacon," explained. "It sends a signal across the galaxy, a signal that the machines follow. When the beacon activates, the machines wake up and come to destroy everything in their path." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And according to these texts, the beacon was built by the—" Jake felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. "What?" Nodded, her face pale. "Thousands of years ago, a group of scientists found the sleeping machines. They thought they could control them. They thought they could use the machines as weapons to conquer the galaxy." She laughed bitterly. "They were fools. The machines cannot be controlled. The moment the beacon activated, they woke up and began their destruction. The scientists were the first to die." "But the beacon was destroyed, right?" Doctor asked. "That is why the machines eventually stopped." Shook her head. "No, the beacon was not destroyed. It was only damaged. It stopped sending the signal, so the machines went back to sleep. But the beacon still exists. It is still out there, and according to these texts, it has been slowly repairing itself for thousands of years." Jake understood now. That is why the machines are returning. The beacon is almost fixed. "Yes," said, "and when it finishes repairing itself, the machines will wake up again. They will follow the signal. They will destroy everything." She looked around the room at the frightened faces of her team. "Unless we find the beacon first and destroy it forever." The next few weeks were chaos. Worked day and night, searching through ancient texts for any clue about the beacon's location. She barely ate. She barely slept. Jake stayed with her, bringing her food, forcing her to rest, holding her when the pressure became too much. Finally, she found it. The beacon was hidden in the dead zone, in the ruins of the... It was deep in the most dangerous part of space, surrounded by the wreckage of a dozen destroyed civilizations. "I have to go there," said. "I am the only one who can read the language. I am the only one who can shut down the beacon." "Then I am coming with you," Jake said immediately. "It is dangerous. You could die." Jake took her hands in his. "I chose you because I saw something special in you, something no one else could see. I am not going to let you face this alone. I will be beside you until the end." Felt tears in her eyes. This time she did not try to stop them. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you care so much about me?" Jake smiled gently. "Because you are the bravest person I have ever met. You spent your whole life being told you were worthless, and you never gave up. You kept learning, kept growing, kept hoping that someday things would be different. That takes more courage than any battle I ever fought." Leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his. It was a gesture of deep trust and affection. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for seeing me." 3 days later, a ship launched from Earth carrying Jake and a team of the best soldiers and scientists humanity had to offer. They were joined by a warship, sent by the Emperor himself. Even sisters had volunteered to come, their pride finally overcome by respect for what their youngest sibling had achieved. As the ships jumped into hyperspace, heading toward the dead zone and whatever horrors awaited there, stood at the observation window and watched the stars blur into lines of light. She was not the broken princess anymore. She was not the outcast. She was the one who would save them all. And she was not alone. The dead zone was a graveyard of stars. Stood on the bridge of the human ship and stared at the ruins floating past the windows. Broken cities drifted in the void. Shattered ships tumbled slowly through the darkness. Once, this had been home to millions of living beings. Now it was nothing but dust and silence. "The is just ahead," the ship's captain announced. His name was Sam Parker, a veteran of the war. "But we are picking up energy signatures. The machines are here." Jake moved to stand beside. Behind them, her sister checked her weapons. The warrior princess had changed over the past weeks. She no longer looked at with pity or contempt. She looked at her with something that might have been admiration. "How many machines?" Jake asked. Captain Parker checked his screens. His face went pale. "Thousands. They are swarming around the planet like insects around a hive." "The beacon must be close to full power," said. "That is why so many have gathered. They are waiting for it to activate completely." "Then we need to hurry," said. "If that beacon finishes repairing itself before we reach it, none of us will survive." The plan was simple but dangerous. The ships would create a distraction, drawing the machines away from the planet. While the battle raged in space, a small team would take a shuttle down to the surface and find the beacon, would shut it down. Then they would escape before the machines realized what had happened. It was not a good plan, but it was the only plan they had. The battle began within minutes. Human and ships fought side by side against the ancient machines. The machines were terrifying, massive constructs of black metal and red light. They moved with perfect coordination like a single mind controlling thousands of bodies. Ships exploded. Soldiers died. But the distraction worked. A path opened to the planet below. Jake and a team of 10 soldiers boarded a small shuttle. As they dropped toward the planet, watched the battle through the window. So many were dying to give her this chance. She could not waste it. The surface of there was worse than she had imagined. The cities were not just destroyed. They were melted, fused into twisted shapes by weapons that burned hotter than stars. The ground was covered in glass where sand had been superheated. Nothing lived here. Nothing would ever live here again. "The beacon is 2 kilometers north," said, checking her scanner. "We need to move fast." They ran through the ruins. their boots crunching on broken glass. The sky above was filled with light and fire as the battle continued. Every few seconds, another ship died, its explosion briefly turning night into day. They were halfway to the beacon when the machines found them. A group of smaller machines, scout units the size of cars, appeared from behind a collapsed building. Their red eyes locked onto the team, weapons powered up with a high-pitched whine. "Get down," Jake shouted. Energy beams cut through the air. 2 soldiers fell instantly, their bodies vaporized. The others opened fire, but their weapons barely scratched the machine's armor. Roared and charged forward. Her 4 arms moved in a blur, wielding 2 heavy rifles and 2 plasma swords. She cut through one machine, then another, but more kept coming. "Go," she screamed at. "I will hold them off, complete the mission." Hesitated. Sheehan had never been close. Her sister had ignored her for their entire lives, but now was willing to die for her. "Thank you," said softly. Then she ran. Jake stayed close beside her. They sprinted through the ruins as explosions echoed behind them. One by one, the sounds of their team's weapons fell silent. Soon, only battle cry could be heard. Then even that stopped. They were alone. The beacon was located in the center of what had once been a great temple. It was a tower of black crystal, pulsing with red light. Strange symbols covered its surface. The same symbols had spent months learning to read. "This is it," she breathed. "The beacon that destroyed a dozen civilizations." She approached slowly, her hands shaking. The air around the beacon felt wrong, heavy with energy that made her skin crawl. She could feel the signal it was sending, a call that echoed across the galaxy, waking the machines from their ancient sleep. "Can you shut it down?" Jake asked. He was watching the entrance, his rifle ready. More machines would be coming soon. "I think so," said, "but I need time to read the controls. The language is ancient, older than anything I have studied before." "Then take the time you need," Jake said. "I will keep you safe." Placed her hands on the beacon and began to read. The symbols were complex, layered with meaning that shifted depending on context. It was like trying to solve a puzzle while running a race, but she had spent her whole life preparing for this moment. All those lonely years in the library, all those dead languages she had taught herself, all that knowledge no one else had cared about. It had led here. Behind her, Jake opened fire. Machines were coming through the entrance. He shot one, then another, but they kept coming. He was pushed back, step by step, closer to where worked. He said, his voice strained, "I cannot hold them much longer." "Almost there," she gasped. Her fingers flew across the symbols, pressing them in sequence. "I just need to find the right combination." A machine broke through Jake's defenses and lunged toward. Jake threw himself in its path. The machine's claw caught him across the chest, tearing through his armor. He fell with a cry of pain. Jake screamed. But she could not stop. If she stopped, they all died. Everyone died. She turned back to the beacon, tears streaming down her face. Her hands moved faster. The symbols began to glow. She was so close, so close. And then she found it, the final sequence, the key that would turn everything off. She pressed the last symbol. The beacon's red light flickered, the pulsing stopped, the signal died. All across the planet the machines froze. Their red eyes dimmed. One by one they collapsed, falling like puppets with cut strings. In space above, the same thing was happening. Thousands of machines went dark and drifted lifeless through the void. The beacon was dead, the signal was gone, the galaxy was saved. Collapsed beside Jake. He was bleeding badly, but he was alive. His eyes fluttered open and found hers. "Did you do it?" he whispered. She nodded, too exhausted to speak. Jake smiled. It was the same smile he had given her in the Great Hall the day he chose her, the day everything changed. "I knew you could," he said. Later, when the rescue ships came, stayed beside Jake. She held his hand as the doctors worked to save him. She did not let go until they told her he would live. Months after that, they stood before the United Council of 100 species. Humans and dozens of others filled the great chamber. They had come to honor the heroes who saved them all. When it was turn to speak, she looked out at the crowd and saw faces she recognized. Admiral Cole, who had doubted her sisters who had ignored her father, the emperor, who had called her worthless. "I was told my whole life that I had no value," she said. "I was told that I was broken, that I would never amount to anything. But I had something my critics did not see. I had patience. I had curiosity. I had the ability to listen to the voices of those who came before us and learn from their mistakes." She looked at Jake, who stood proudly in the front row, a scar across his chest where the machine had wounded him. "Someone once asked why Sergeant chose me when he could have had any of my powerful sisters. Why he picked the weakest princess instead of a warrior or a telepath." She smiled. It was a warm smile, full of love and gratitude. "The answer is simple. Jake saw something in me that I could not see in myself. He saw that true strength is not about power or weapons. It is about never giving up. It is about using what you have, even when everyone tells you it is not enough. It is about believing that even the smallest voice can change the galaxy." She looked at the audience one last time. He did not choose weakness that day. He chose the most powerful thing in the universe. She paused. He chose hope. The chamber erupted in applause. Humans and aliens alike rose to their feet, cheering for the outcast princess who had saved them all. And in the front row, Jake clapped louder than anyone, his eyes shining with tears of pride. He had seen her true value from the very beginning. And now so did everyone else.